When we are children, many things in life feel ordinary. The sound of someone walking in the kitchen early in the morning, the smell of warm food before the sun is fully awake, a quiet voice reminding you to bring a jacket before leaving the house. At the time, these things feel small, almost invisible. They become part of the background of our daily life. We rarely stop to ask why they happen or how much love might be hidden inside those simple moments. But as we grow older, something strange begins to happen. Memories return. Small details we once ignored suddenly become clear. And sometimes we realize that the quiet things someone did for us were actually the most important things of all. This story begins in a small American town called Cedar Hill. It was the kind of town where people knew their neighbors, where the grocery store closed early in the evening, where children rode bicycles along quiet streets during summer afternoons. In a modest white house near the end of Maple Street lived a boy named Daniel. Daniel grew up in that house with his mother. Her name was Eleanor. To most people in town, Eleanor was simply known as a kind and quiet woman. She worked part-time at the local bakery. She often walked to work in the early morning while the sky was still pale and quiet. People who passed her on the sidewalk usually saw the same gentle smile. "Good morning," she would say softly, and then she would continue on her way. Daniel, however, did not think of his mother as someone special, at least not when he was young. To him, she was simply Mom, someone who reminded him to brush his teeth, someone who told him to finish his homework, someone who asked too many questions about school. Like most children, Daniel believed the world naturally worked the way it did. Food appeared on the table every evening. Clean clothes appeared in his closet. His lunchbox was always ready in the morning. He never wondered how these things happened. They simply did. Every weekday morning, Daniel woke up to the same quiet routine. The house would already be warm. Sunlight would slowly stretch across the kitchen floor, and his mother would be standing near the stove. Sometimes she hummed a soft tune while she cooked. Sometimes she simply worked in silence. When Daniel walked into the kitchen, breakfast was already waiting. Scrambled eggs, get toast, sometimes pancakes on special days. "Good morning," she would say. Daniel would sit down and eat quickly, often still half asleep. Then his mother would slide a small brown lunch bag across the table. "Don't forget this," she would remind him. Inside the bag was always something simple: a sandwich, a piece of fruit, and sometimes a small handwritten note. Daniel rarely read the notes carefully. Most of the time, he glanced at them for only a second. It's that "have a good day," "you can do it," "remember to smile." To Daniel, these messages seemed unnecessary. He was a busy boy with school, friends, and games to think about. He usually crumpled the note and placed it back in the bag. After breakfast, Eleanor always stood near the door as Daniel prepared to leave. "Do you have your homework?" "Yes." "Your jacket?" "Yes." "Your lunch?" "Yes." Then she would gently fix the collar of his shirt or brush a piece of dust from his sleeve. And small gestures, quiet habits, Daniel sometimes felt impatient. "Mom, I'm fine," he would say. "I know," she would answer with a soft smile, "but mothers still check." After Daniel left for school, Eleanor cleaned the kitchen. She washed the dishes carefully and placed them neatly on the drying rack. Then she tied her hair back and prepared to walk to the bakery. The bakery sat on the corner of Main Street. It smelled of warm bread and cinnamon. Eleanor worked there 3 mornings a week. Her job was simple. She arranged pastries in the display window. She greeted customers, and sometimes she wrapped fresh loaves of bread in brown paper. Many customers liked Eleanor because she spoke gently and listened patiently. If someone looked tired, she would quietly say, "Take care of yourself today." If a mother came in with a restless child, Eleanor sometimes slipped a small cookie into the bag. Like on the house, she would whisper with a wink. But after her shift ended, Eleanor always returned home quickly. She still had many things to do before Daniel came back from school. She swept the floors, folded laundry, prepared dinner ingredients. Sometimes she sat by the window for a few quiet minutes with a cup of tea. From that window, she could see Maple Street stretching into the distance. And every afternoon around 3:30, she watched for a familiar figure walking home. In Daniel, he usually came through the front door quickly, dropping his backpack near the couch. "Hi, Mom," he would say. "How was school?" she asked. "Fine." "What did you learn today?" "Nothing special." Then Daniel would disappear into his room or run outside to play with friends. To him, these conversations were routine, unimportant. But Eleanor always listened carefully, even to the shortest answers. She believed small conversations were still important conversations. Evenings in the house were quiet but warm. Dinner was usually simple: soup, chicken, rice, or vegetables. They sat at the small wooden table near the kitchen window. Eleanor always asked one question during dinner: "What was the best moment of your day?" Daniel often shrugged, "I don't know." But sometimes he answered, "Playing basketball, getting a good grade, talking with my friend Mike." Eleanor listened as if each answer was the most interesting story in the world. After dinner, she washed the dishes while Daniel finished homework at the table. Sometimes she placed a gentle hand on his shoulder when passing by. No words, just presence. At night before Daniel went to bed, Eleanor always knocked softly on his door. "Good night," she would say. "Sleep well." Sometimes she added one more sentence: "I'm proud of you." Daniel usually responded the same way every night: "Good night, Mom." And that was all. To Daniel, these moments felt ordinary, and just part of daily life. But years later, long after childhood had passed, he would begin to remember these small things: the morning breakfasts, the quiet notes in his lunch, the gentle questions at dinner. And slowly, he would begin to understand something he never noticed as a child. Those small things his mother did every day were never small at all. As Daniel grew older, life slowly became busier. School became more demanding, friends became more important, and the quiet routines inside the house on Maple Street began to feel less interesting to him. This is something that happens to many children. When we are young, home feels like the center of the world. But as we become teenagers, the world outside the house begins to pull us in different directions. Daniel was no different. By the time he turned 14, mornings in the kitchen no longer felt peaceful. They felt rushed. His alarm clock rang later than it should. He often hurried through breakfast while checking the time. "Eat a little more," Eleanor would say gently. "I'm not hungry," Daniel would reply while grabbing his backpack. Even the small notes in his lunch bag began to feel unnecessary to him. One afternoon at school, his friend Mike noticed the folded paper beside Daniel's sandwich. "What's that?" Mike asked. Daniel shrugged. "Just something my mom puts in there." Mike opened the note and read it. "Believe in yourself today." He laughed a little. "Your mom writes you notes?" Daniel felt slightly embarrassed. "Yeah, she does it all the time." After that day, Daniel often threw the notes away without reading them, not because he disliked them, but because he didn't want anyone to see them. At home, Eleanor never asked if he read the notes. She simply kept placing them in the lunch bag every morning. One day the note said, Remember, difficult days do not last forever. Another day it said, you are stronger than you think. But Daniel rarely noticed. His mind was busy with homework, sports, and the complicated emotions of growing up. Sometimes he answered his mother's questions with only one or two words. How is school? Fine. What did you do today? Nothing much. But Eleanor still listened patiently. She never complained about the short answers. She understood something Daniel did not yet understand. Children grow through seasons, and sometimes love must be quiet and patient during those seasons. One autumn evening, something small happened that Daniel barely noticed at the time, but many years later, it would return clearly in his memory. It was raining outside, the kind of steady rain that makes the whole world feel slower. Daniel sat at the kitchen table working on a difficult math assignment. His pencil moved across the paper, then stopped. He erased, then tried again, and frustration slowly appeared on his face. I hate this, he muttered quietly. From the sink, Eleanor glanced toward him. Is it difficult? She asked gently. Yes, Daniel said. It doesn't make sense. Eleanor dried her hands with a towel and walked over. She looked at the problem carefully. I don't remember much math, she admitted softly, but maybe we can look at it together. For the next 10 minutes, the two of them studied the problem. They tried different ways of solving it. Eventually, Daniel figured out the answer. There, he said. Eleanor smiled warmly. I knew you could do it. Daniel nodded and returned to his homework. To him, the moment passed quickly. Just another ordinary evening. But there was something he didn't see. When Eleanor returned to the sink, she quietly rubbed her temples for a moment. She had been awake since before sunrise. Her morning shift at the bakery had been long, and her feet were tired from standing all day. But she had not mentioned that, because helping Daniel with his homework felt more important. Later that same night, Daniel went to his room after finishing his schoolwork. He turned on the small desk lamp and opened a book. A few minutes later, there was a soft knock on the door. Come in, he said. Eleanor stepped inside. She held a small glass of warm milk. You forgot this, she said. Daniel almost laughed. Mom, I'm not a little kid. I know, she said with a smile. But warm milk still helps people sleep. He accepted the glass anyway. Thanks. Before leaving, Eleanor paused for a moment at the doorway. Daniel? Yes? Even when things feel hard, you don't have to face them alone. Daniel nodded politely, but he didn't think much about those words. Not then. Years continued passing quietly inside the house on Maple Street. Daniel finished high school. He became more independent, more focused on the future, college applications, the part-time jobs, dreams about life beyond Cedar Hill. Through all of those changes, Eleanor's small daily habits never disappeared. She still woke early, still cooked breakfast, still asked about his day, still wrote the small notes for his lunch when he worked late shifts during his final year of school. One evening during that last year, Daniel came home late after studying with friends. The house was dark except for the kitchen light. Eleanor sat at the table with a book in front of her, but she wasn't reading. She looked up as he entered. You're home? She said quietly. Daniel glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight. Mom, you should be sleeping. Eleanor smiled. I just wanted to make sure you got home safely. Daniel poured himself a glass of water. You didn't have to wait up. I know, she said gently, but mothers often do things they don't have to do. At the time, Daniel simply nodded. He did not yet understand the deeper meaning behind those words. because some kinds of love are so constant, so steady, that we mistake them for ordinary life. And it would take many years and many miles away from that small house on Maple Street before Daniel truly understood the meaning behind the small things his mother had done every single day. The summer Daniel turned 18 felt different from every other summer before it. The air in Cedar Hill was warm and familiar, but inside Daniel there was a quiet feeling of change. Soon he would leave for college. Soon he would live in a different city. Soon the house on Maple Street would no longer be the center of his daily life. At first, that thought felt exciting. Daniel imagined new friends, new experiences, a new sense of independence. But Eleanor seemed quieter than usual during those months. Not sad, just thoughtful. One evening in late July, Daniel found her standing in the backyard garden. The sun was setting behind the trees, and the soft orange light covered the small rows of vegetables she had planted every year: tomatoes, green beans, a few herbs. Daniel walked over and leaned against the wooden fence. "You're still taking care of this garden?" he asked. Eleanor smiled slightly. "Plants still need water even when life is busy." Daniel looked at the small garden with mild curiosity. He had seen it his entire life, but never really thought about it. "You always plant the same things," he said. "Yes," Eleanor replied, "because they grow well here." She gently touched one of the tomato plants. "Some things grow best when they stay in the same place for a long time." Daniel nodded, but his thoughts were already moving somewhere else. College, dorm rooms, new beginnings. A week later, boxes slowly began appearing around the house: books, clothes, school supplies. Daniel packed his belongings with excitement. Eleanor helped quietly. She folded shirts carefully, wrapped fragile things in newspaper, and placed small items into boxes that Daniel had forgotten. Sometimes she paused for a moment while holding something: an old photograph, a school project, a small toy from years ago. Then she would place it gently in a box without saying anything. One afternoon, Daniel found her standing in his bedroom doorway. She was looking at the empty shelves. "You had so many books here," she said softly. Daniel laughed. "Most of them were from school." "Yes," she replied, "but some of them were stories you loved." Daniel shrugged. "I guess I outgrew them." Eleanor nodded slowly. Children often outgrow things. That evening, they ate dinner together in the kitchen, the same kitchen where Daniel had eaten thousands of meals since childhood. The same table, the same quiet yellow light above them. Eleanor placed a plate in front of him. His favorite meal: roasted chicken with potatoes. "You didn't have to make this," Daniel said. "I wanted to," she answered simply. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Eleanor asked a quiet question. "Are you nervous about leaving?" Daniel thought about it. "A little," he admitted, "but mostly excited." "That's good," Eleanor said with a gentle smile. "New places should feel exciting." After dinner, Daniel stood up and began clearing the table. "I'll wash the dishes tonight," he said. Eleanor looked surprised. "You don't have to." "I know," Daniel replied, "but I can." While he washed the dishes, Eleanor sat at the table watching him quietly. The sound of running water filled the room. For a moment, Daniel suddenly remembered something. "Mom," he said. "Yes?" "Why did you always stay up when I came home late?" Eleanor thought for a moment before answering. "Because it helped me sleep better." Daniel laughed softly. "That doesn't make sense," Eleanor smiled. "It makes sense to mothers." Later that night, Daniel went to his room. Most of his belongings were already packed. The room looked strangely empty. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. For the first time, the thought of leaving felt a little heavier. A soft knock appeared at the door. "Come in," Daniel said. Eleanor stepped inside. She held something small in her hands. I found this while cleaning the hallway closet," she said. She handed it to him. It was an old lunch note, one of the small folded papers she had placed in his lunch bag for years. Daniel opened it slowly. The handwriting was familiar, neat, careful. The note said, "You don't have to be perfect to do something meaningful." Daniel looked up. "You kept these?" Eleanor smiled gently. "Some of them came back home in your backpack." Daniel felt slightly embarrassed. "I guess I didn't read many of them." "That's okay," she said kindly. "They were never meant to pressure you." "Then why did you write them?" he asked. Eleanor paused for a moment. Then she answered in a calm voice. "Because sometimes a few encouraging words can travel farther than we expect." Daniel folded the note again and placed it on the desk. At that moment, he still didn't fully understand. To him, it was simply another small memory, another small detail from childhood. But years later, when life became more complicated, when challenges felt heavier, when he faced moments of doubt far away from Cedar Hill, those quiet words would return to him, and he would finally realize that the smallest things his mother did had been quietly preparing him for the world all along. The morning Daniel left for college arrived sooner than he expected. The sun had barely risen over Cedar Hill when the car was already packed. 2 suitcases, several boxes, and a backpack filled with books and small personal things. The house on Maple Street felt unusually quiet that morning. Daniel walked through the living room one last time. The same couch, the same old clock on the wall, the same soft creaking sound from the wooden floor. So many ordinary things he had barely noticed while growing up. Now they suddenly felt important. In the kitchen, Eleanor was preparing breakfast, just like she had done every morning for years. Eggs, toast, and a cup of warm coffee for herself. Daniel sat down at the table. "You didn't have to wake up this early," he said. Eleanor smiled gently. "I always wake up early." They ate slowly. Neither of them spoke much. But the silence did not feel uncomfortable. It felt full of things that did not need words. After breakfast, Daniel carried the last box to the car. When he returned to the house, Eleanor was standing near the doorway. She held a small paper bag. "What's that?" Daniel asked. "Just a few snacks for the road," she replied. Daniel took the bag. "Thanks, Mom." Then he noticed something else inside, a folded piece of paper. He laughed softly. "You're still doing this?" Eleanor looked slightly amused. "Some habits are difficult to stop." Daniel placed the paper back in the bag without opening it. "I'll read it later." Eleanor nodded. They stepped outside together. The morning air felt cool and calm, and birds were beginning to sing in the trees along Maple Street. Daniel placed his backpack in the car and closed the door. Then he turned toward his mother. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Daniel said quietly, "I guess this is it." Eleanor looked at him with the same warm expression she had carried for years. "You'll do well," she said. Daniel smiled. "I hope so." Eleanor stepped closer and gently adjusted the collar of his jacket, a small habit she had done many times when he was younger. "There," she said softly. "You're ready." Daniel suddenly realized something. For 18 years, this woman had quietly prepared him for the world. Every breakfast, every note, every late night waiting for him to come home. Every small act that once seemed ordinary, all of it had been part of something larger, but he still did not fully understand that yet. He hugged her quickly. "I'll call when I arrive," he said. I know you will," Eleanor replied. Daniel climbed into the car. The engine started. He waved once through the window. Then the car slowly drove down Maple Street. Eleanor stood on the sidewalk watching until the car disappeared at the end of the road. Only then did she quietly return inside the house. The kitchen still smelled like toast and coffee. 2 cups sat on the table, one empty, one half full. Eleanor washed the dishes slowly and placed them in the rack. Then she walked past Daniel's bedroom. The door was open. The room looked quiet and unfamiliar without his belongings. She stepped inside and looked around. A faint smile appeared on her face. Not a sad smile, just a reflective one. She gently closed the door and turned off the light. Meanwhile, Daniel continued driving toward the city where his new life would begin. Hours passed on the highway. Music played softly in the background. At a rest stop, he finally opened the small paper bag his mother had given him. Inside were sandwiches, a small apple, and the folded note. Daniel opened the paper. The familiar handwriting appeared once again. It said, "Wherever you go, remember that kindness will always guide you home." Daniel stared at the words for a long moment. Something about them felt deeper than the notes he had seen before. He folded the paper carefully and placed it in his wallet. Then he continued driving. And at that moment, Daniel believed he was simply beginning a new chapter of life. He did not yet realize something important. The quiet lessons his mother had given him, through years of small daily actions, would follow him much farther than Cedar Hill. And many years later, those simple words and those small memories would finally reveal their true meaning. Years passed more quickly than Daniel expected. College ended. Work began. Life moved forward in the busy rhythm that adulthood often brings. Daniel moved from one apartment to another, from one city to the next. He met many people. He faced new challenges. Some days were exciting. Some days were difficult. But through all those changes, the quiet habits of life slowly began to resemble something familiar, something he had seen long ago in a small house on Maple Street. At first, Daniel didn't notice it, but small things started happening. On cold mornings, and he found himself making extra coffee for a coworker who looked tired. When a neighbor in his apartment building struggled to carry groceries upstairs, Daniel automatically stepped forward to help. At work, when a younger employee felt nervous about a presentation, Daniel quietly encouraged them. "You'll do fine," he would say. "You're more capable than you think." One evening, after a long day at work, Daniel returned home to his small apartment. He placed his keys on the table and sat down on the couch. The room was quiet, a little too quiet. That was when he noticed something interesting. Many of the words he used to encourage people sounded strangely familiar, as if he had heard them somewhere before. He stood up and walked toward a small drawer near his desk. Inside was his wallet. Carefully folded between old receipts was a small piece of paper, the same paper Eleanor had given him the morning he left for college. Daniel unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was still neat, still calm. "Wherever you go, remember that kindness will always guide you home." Daniel sat quietly for a long time. Suddenly, memories began appearing in his mind. The warm kitchen in the early mornings, the lunch notes in his school bag, the quiet evenings when Eleanor waited for him to come home, the glass of warm milk outside his bedroom door. All the small things he once believed were ordinary. Now they felt different. Now they felt meaningful. A few weeks later, Daniel decided to visit Cedar Hill. He had not been back for several years. The town looked almost the same streets, the same quiet houses, and finally, the familiar sign for Maple Street. Daniel parked the car and walked slowly toward the old house. The white paint on the fence looked slightly older. The garden in the backyard was smaller now, but the place still carried the same peaceful feeling. When Eleanor opened the door, and her smile appeared immediately. "Daniel?" she said softly. "Hi, Mom," he replied. For a moment, they simply stood there looking at each other. Then Eleanor hugged him warmly. "You look well," she said. "I learned from a good teacher," Daniel answered. Later that evening, they sat together in the kitchen, the same kitchen where so many small moments had happened years before. Daniel looked around slowly. "Do you still wake up early?" he asked. Eleanor laughed gently. "Old habits stay with us." Daniel reached into his wallet and placed the folded note on the table. "I kept this," he said. Eleanor looked at it and smiled. "You finally read it?" Daniel nodded. "And I finally understand it." Eleanor did not ask what he meant. She simply listened. Daniel looked at her with quiet gratitude. "All those small things you did. Every day. They taught me something." "What was that?" Eleanor asked gently. Daniel thought for a moment before answering. "That kindness doesn't have to be loud to change someone's life." The room became quiet again. Outside, the evening light slowly faded behind the trees. After dinner, Daniel stood near the kitchen sink washing the dishes. Eleanor watched him the same way she once had years earlier. When he finished, Daniel placed the last plate in the rack. Then he noticed something sitting on the table, a small folded piece of paper. He laughed softly. "You're still doing this?" Eleanor smiled. "Some habits are difficult to stop." Daniel opened the note. Inside were only a few simple words. "Kindness grows quietly." Daniel folded the paper carefully. This time, he did not place it in his pocket right away. Instead, he looked around the kitchen one more time, and he finally understood something that had taken him many years to see. Love is not always found in grand gestures. Sometimes love lives inside the smallest daily actions: a warm breakfast, a patient conversation, a quiet note of encouragement. The small things that mothers do every day often become the lessons that guide us for the rest of our lives. Thank you for listening to this gentle story. If this story reminded you of someone special in your life, take a moment to appreciate the small things they once did for you. Sometimes the quietest acts of love leave the deepest marks on our hearts.